This video is about getting or generating a random sample and ways that you can do that. First thing we need to do when thinking about how we're going to generate our sample is that trying to think about what the population is. Because the important thing about our sample is it needs to be free of bias. And you should know by now that the definition of bias is that not every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected in your sample. So what we need to know is what the population is, and then think about how we can make it so that randomly everyone has that equal chance. So if we take it, you need an investigative question to define the population. So what we're interested in is, I wonder what the typical height is of a person on the island of Providence. So by having that question, it quickly defines what the population is. And the population is any person on the island of Providence has to have an equal chance of being selected. So from our island simulation, that's the island of Providence. So we have to make sure that we're selecting anyone from there to be included in our sample. Now, to obtain our random unbiased sample, we obviously have different sections where people live or where we can access them. All right. And specifically, I'm looking at a simple random sampling where for each of the participants in my sample, I'm going to first randomly choose a town. Okay, so that every town has an equal chance of being selected. Likewise, that within that town we randomly choose a house, and then also within that town, within that house, that there may be more than one occupant. So we need to make sure that's randomly selected as well. So starting off with looking at the towns, we can look at the island and we can see that there are 9 different towns to select from. So we can randomly choose those and then continue the randomization. So effectively, you're generating for each sample member will have 3 numbers that are randomly selected. Their town, the house they live in, and which member of the family they are. So how are we going to randomly generate these numbers for the different sample participants? I'm going to use my graphics calculator emulator, which is a slightly older version than most of you will have, but it's the same sort of process. But you don't have to use a calculator. There are a number of random generators online that you can use, but the key information you need to know is how many possibilities there are, and then obviously trying to generate your number. So if we take it out, look at our island again, we can see we've allocated those numbers. There's no specific order, or it didn't matter which one to switch, as long as they're all, we know that there's 9 possibilities and we've allocated a result for each one. So on your graphics calculator, you can go to the run function. Okay, and then you want to have a random number generator. So for most of you press Option, then you go to the next F6, then you go to F3, and then I've got this screen here, and I'm going to use F4. Now, a lot of you with the newer calculators will have an extra function there, which is ranInt or INT. Okay, that's actually a slightly better function that rather than generating a random decimal, it'll generate random numbers. So you can put the lowest value and the highest value, and it will generate your numbers. So in this case, you would put 1 and 4. Because I've got the older calculator, I can still generate something that will work. is that I can generate that it's going to be 9 times rand int or rand number. I'm going to put +1 there. So what's happening now is I'm generating a random numbers between 1 and 9. If I just look at everything before the decimal point. So you can just ignore the numbers at the decimal point. So when you've decided, right, so for my first sample, I am going to choose the following random number, which is 3. So in this case, 3 is our town down here. Okay, so Takasaki. Okay, if we click on that, we should end up with the town pop up. Now suddenly we're inside the town, so we now need to choose our house. So first thing we need to do is work out how many possible outcomes there are. Doesn't matter that some of the houses are empty, because we can just ignore and redraw them. So we can see the highest number is 314. So what we need to do for our formula is change it again, so 314, and then put times random number, so F4 +1, and we generate 227. So if we scroll up and look for our 227, and there's our house 227. And we open up the house and we can see that there are 3 occupants. Now you can see there is Shanta, Kazuki, sorry, and Elias. So you'll notice that Elias is 5. It might be in some scenarios that you've got a specific age grade, so you want to make that clear from your population. But going back to our original population, it was the people on the island, so I'm still going to include all 3. It may be that you want to change your population to adults or anyone over 18, over 6, something like that, and then you would have to change that within it. So going back to my number generator, I just want 3 times random number and then +1, and you can see that we've generated 2. So we're going to choose 2 on the list, and Kazuki is the person who is in our sample. And we can go through there, and there'll be another video explaining how about you collect your data. The key thing to remember though is that while I'm using a calculator, you don't have to use a calculator, but it needs to be something that will randomly generate what you need and also change depending on the number of possibilities that you need.